I think the interesting part for having been chair, it's a little bit easier to move it through the organization than if you're not there. If you have to kind of influence, and so one of the thought processes that I think is worth considering is almost like pre-clearing it with your board, because I've known board members, and I knew one in particular who I debated this with. The problem was he was a tax accountant, and so he had me pretty dead to rights on a lot of the elements. He was convinced CRA was going to tear this thing apart. But he was a roadblock inside of a very major charitable organization to having people use this product. And I said, you have to understand that there's a leverage possibility here to increase what it happens to be. But he helped me understand that there is also resistance, and there's also the abject fear of damaging the organization because something about it doesn't really work, or there is a challenge or anything that rises up can splash back on the organization. So you have to be very sensitive to that. And at Outward Bound, I was very sensitive. We've been around for 50 years. We don't want to kind of lose that, because you can lose it in the press pretty quickly. We've all seen organizations rapidly damaged just because of that. So respecting that is essentially doing the homework, understanding it as best as you can, bringing people on board who can help, but getting the board comfortable with this as a tool. Because you don't want to go out to a donor, encourage them to use it, and have your board come back and say, we don't want to do that. So there's some work you can do in the beginning to prepare the path, and then when you go that it's there. And if your donor is wondering about it, you can say, well, we've pre-cleared it at the board. We have been concerned about our reputational risk, and so here's what we've done. And so those are the kinds of preparations that I found were useful. And in the case of Outward Bound, we actually discovered that one of the, if you will, the people who have been supportive was the head of a mining company. And so we went to see him, and he was prepared to put together one of his financings and give us exclusive right to it. And actually Maryland was involved. So from that standpoint, it's an unusual one, but that gives you a unique situation to kind of talk to your constituents and see what you can do. So for me, I've used it a couple of times, and it's always been to be able to bump it up. So in the Outward Bound case, we did a campaign to try and match. So I basically offered to donate a certain amount, more than I would have normally done, to kind of show the support, and we use that to try and fundraise. We've all, I'm sure, worked in that particular effort to try and encourage people to go along. So there are a variety of ways that you can utilize this to get it mobilized and get it going.